If you believe that you are just a heap of molecules that one day disintegrates and you cease to exist, or if you wonder whether you keep reincarnating until you reach a state of bliss, then this channel is for you. Or if you are a Christian and you don't know how to defend your case against materialism or religious syncretism or universalism, keep watching this and the next episodes. I'm Dr. Ernest Valea, and I invite you to watch and learn from this series of videos intended to respond to various philosophical challenges posed to Christianity. I hold bachelor's degrees in chemistry and in theology, as well as a PhD in theology, awarded by the University of Wales. I created this channel in order to help Christians of all denominations to strengthen their confidence that our faith is not something which belongs to the past, that should quietly disappear. I'll argue that we should not look to science in order to attain immortality, nor should we seek a so-called higher form of spirituality, such as yoga or Buddhist meditation, because neither science nor other religions can provide better answers when it comes to finding the meaning of life. And we should be confident that Christianity is not just a dead tradition, an opium for the peoples, as Marxist ideology claims. It is not an obstacle to progress which needs to be relegated to the dustbin of history. As it must be already obvious from my accent, I'm not a native English speaker. I'm a Romanian living in Romania, a little known country of Eastern Europe. This channel started after a Romanian version of it became available online, and the idea to make the videos available in English came when I realized how much confusion still exists on the topics I cover. So I hope this channel will be discovered by those in search of answers to the many secular and religious challenges to Christian faith. You can help me achieve this by subscribing and sharing these videos on social media. What I suggest in these videos is that Christianity is not outdated, that its credibility is not affected by the latest achievements in science and technology, and that it cannot be considered just one of many forms of spirituality to choose from. I myself am a Roman Catholic, and that's why I start this and the following episodes with the sign of the cross like this. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. These videos are recorded in the very simple studio that I have set up in my office. So please don't expect special effects or fancy techniques in editing. What should matter most is the content. So far I haven't appeared on social media, for I still believe in the value of the written word. Since I prefer to set down my ideas in writing, I have written these 8 books. 4 in Romanian and 4 in English. Here they are. My first book in English was published back in 2009, while I was a doctoral student. It is The Buddha and the Christ, Reciprocal Views, an assessment of how the teachings of the Buddha and the Christ relate to each other, what they have in common and what is different, and how the teachings of each would work in the context of the teachings of the other. In this and all other books, as well as on this channel, I strongly oppose religious syncretism, the idea that different religions can be combined and integrated and taken as equally good roads to a similar spiritual fulfillment. So don't expect here a soft, New Age-like syncretistic approach to religiosity. I must confess from the very first episode that I believe that Jesus Christ is the only hope for our salvation, as Christianity has always taught. My published PhD thesis is this: Buddhist-Christian dialogue as theological exchange, an orthodox contribution to comparative theology. In this book, I assess Buddhist-Christian dialogue using the principles of comparative theology and taking as guiding line the views on human perfection as defined in Mahayana Buddhism and Eastern Orthodox Christianity. My third book is on alternative medicine, with the title The Spiritual Dimension of Alternative Medicine, a Christian Assessment. Its intended readers are Christians who want to live consistently with their faith, so it is a tool to help them discover the hidden spiritual beliefs of alternative medicine. And finally, the most recent one appeared this year and is called Artificial Intelligence, Reincarnation and Resurrection, an inquiry into the ultimate fulfillment of human nature. It explores old and new hopes that have emerged in the human quest to defeat death. Some of its topics will be covered in the following episodes, in addressing questions such as: are we just physical machines of great complexity with the brain as the hardware on which consciousness operates as its software? If so, can we speculate on ways in which the mind could be uploaded to a machine and no longer suffer the frailty of this biological body? Or could an android robot or a mind file in a computer simulation be conscious? On the other hand, as the title suggests, it also examines the hope of survival through reincarnation, according to the teachings of Eastern religions and New Age thought. And finally, it argues for our hope in the resurrection, as always taught by Christianity. All these 4 books are available on Amazon, also in Kindle format. Since I am a Roman Catholic Christian, I state my arguments using the Bible and the apostolic tradition. That is, the teachings that the Church has handed down since the time of the apostles. But since I draw on fundamental Christian beliefs common to all Christians, I trust that these videos will be equally useful for Eastern Orthodox and Protestant believers when faced with challenges posed by materialist philosophy and other religions. The next episodes will look at the challenges posed by materialist philosophy. So we'll examine to what extent materialist philosophy can explain human nature, or more specifically, what is consciousness, the self, and free will. And we'll also assess the claim that technology will someday be able to emulate consciousness, and humanity will attain its dream of immortality. A complete ideology has developed on these lines called transhumanism. So in the following episodes, I'll address the claim that the unstoppable progress in science and technology will make Christian faith obsolete or a hindrance to our perpetual evolution. To illustrate this idea, think of how much technology has changed our world in the last, say, 40 years. Think about the technology we had back then and what we have today. For instance, think about what a phone was like in the 80s and what it is now. In the 80s, in Romania, a phone looked like this. A big plastic device with a disc that you had to rotate with your finger to dial a number. After you got a tone, in the hope that you will be able to connect. And what is a phone today, less than 40 years later? Not just a device that enables you to talk to someone, but also a way to see him or her. And it has become much more than that. The phone is mobile, so you can take it with you anywhere. And you can use it as a TV set, as I suppose that most of you will watch this video on your cell phone. It has the function of a TV, a GPS, camera, video recorder, weather report source, newspaper, book collection, compass, and even acts as a replacement of shops, since almost anything can be bought online using your phone. If such a simple device has evolved so much in 40 years, says the argument, we can imagine that technology will help the human body to become immortal, thus replacing the need for religion, the need for faith in something unseen. That's what the transhumanist dream looks like. But even before posting the following episodes on the materialist worldview on human nature, I must say from the very beginning that the progress of science and technology should not scare Christians. That is, it should not make us believe that our faith is a relic of the Middle Ages. The materialist vision denies the existence of God, of the immaterial world, and of life after death. It claims that the only reality is the physical one, that we can observe by our senses, touch and see, and analyze by conducting scientific experiments. But this consideration is itself a kind of faith, for it is something that cannot be proven scientifically. Christians assume that God created matter, while materialists assume that matter has always existed and is all there is. Science cannot prove that God does not exist, because that would be a task that goes beyond its limitations. Science can only tell us how the physical world works, based on observation, the development of hypotheses, their verification through repeatable experiments, and finally by reformulating initial hypotheses as laws of nature. Science cannot tell us anything about God, about his existence or non-existence, for God cannot be made the object of scientific investigation. The belief that science denies the existence of God is actually a philosophy of science called scientism. It argues that the whole of reality must be subject to the possibility of scientific investigation, and anything that evades this possibility cannot exist. But this claim is just an assumption that science itself cannot prove. Scientism, as a philosophy, stops at formulating hypotheses on the ultimate nature of the world, for it cannot verify them experimentally. Therefore, to claim that only matter exists is an unjustified extension of the scientific method. So it's just a philosophical theory, not a scientific fact. Christianity does not despise science. It rather reminds us of its proper place. Christians believe that God created the world, that He made it function according to certain rules, and that also He created our reason. Through our reason, He makes us capable of understanding the laws of nature and be able to integrate in the world He created. In the end, science is possible because God created both the world and our reason. And this is the primary assumption on which the first scientists worked. A second important clarification for everything that follows in the coming episodes concerns the need for philosophy. Do Christians need philosophy, or is it enough to read the Bible and find in it all the answers to any challenges posed to our faith? Well, we must keep in mind that these episodes are meant to respond to challenges addressed to Christianity, precisely on philosophical grounds, and therefore we must be able to give answers by using the same language, the language of philosophy. Philosophy has to do with the limits to which human reason can rise to the knowledge of truth. But Christianity holds that we cannot reach the knowledge of God by our unaided reason. So we must clarify the relationship between faith and reason. From a Christian point of view, both reason and faith are given to us by God and can only contradict each other if one of them, or maybe both of them, are misused. Pope John Paul II went so far to say that faith and reason are like two wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. So what is the right relationship between faith and reason? We cannot study God by means of our finite reason, as we study anything else in this world, because He is not a fellow created being or a thing, but our Creator, the one who sustains His whole creation by grace. We can only know Him if He takes the initiative to present Himself to us. That is, if He somehow speaks to us according to our limited capacities, at our level of understanding. Think of the following illustration. How could ants know what a human being is? An ant can probably know that we exist because it sees us. But what people are in their essence, it could not know unless, following an imaginary experiment, one of us were to take the initiative to make himself or herself small, very small, of an ant's size, in a way possible only in a science fiction scenario, and live in their midst, explaining to them in their language and their understanding what a human being is. Of course, this illustration would make sense if ants were rational creatures and used some language. But if we understand the point of this illustration, something like this was achieved by God in Jesus Christ. The Apostle John tells us in his Gospel, I quote, And the Word became flesh and lived among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. This is not a science fiction scenario, but a historical fact that actually happened 2000 years ago, when God the Son stepped into our history, took a human nature and made himself known to us. This initiative taken by God to make himself known to us is called in theology revelation. And the means by which we respond to God's revelation is faith. Faith is therefore not an abandonment of reason, but a personal response to the initiative God has taken to present himself to us. The Catechism of the Catholic Church emphasizes this personal dimension of faith, saying, I quote, "Faith is first of all a personal adherence of man to God. At the same time and inseparably, it is a free assent to the whole truth that God has revealed." So faith does not mean believing something we know it is not true, as our former communist leaders once said. Faith does not require the abandonment of reason, but is the way by which we accept what God tells us about himself. In a way, faith is related to the way we know other non-scientific facts. For instance, it is related to how we know history. No one of us has witnessed the Battle of Waterloo, for instance, in 1815. But we know it was a real historical event because we accept the witness of those who fought there. We accept it on their authority and trustworthiness. In a similar way, we accept what God has revealed about himself. We find God's revelation primarily in the Bible, a book full of historical events in which God presents himself to us according to our capacity to understand him, so that we may be able to answer his initiative in a loving relationship. Therefore, the starting point of Christian theology is not the sum of speculations about things that we cannot understand by following science. Theology rather starts from the self-revelation of God. According to the Catechism, and I quote again, "By revealing himself, God wishes to make them capable of responding to him, and of knowing him, and of loving him far beyond their own natural capacity." The role of reason in relationship to faith is to express the truths of faith in an intelligible way and to help us act accordingly. Christians have always used the rational discourse and even the resources of Greek philosophy to express their faith. Let us remember that in formulating the doctrine of the Holy Trinity, the Cappadocian fathers in the 4th century used the philosophical concepts of ousia and hypostasis borrowed from Neoplatonism. And St. Thomas Aquinas did the same in explaining the Christian view of human nature, using concepts taken from Aristotle, as we will see in one of the upcoming episodes. Until Descartes, Christian Europe did not even have philosophers in our present modern sense of completely rejecting a theological background. Only since Descartes have we witnessed an emancipation of philosophy from the state of a so-called maid of theology. That is why Pope John Paul II spoke of faith and reason as two wings that need to work in harmony. At the end of this introductory episode, I would like to tell you what made me question the whole materialist approach. When I was 14, I really believed that science explained everything and that humans appeared as a result of Darwinian evolution. At that time, I was living under a communist regime, and I had no resources to make me question materialism. However, I had thoughts that troubled me. Transhumanism, which will be the topic of one of the following episodes, is grounded on a disturbing fear of death. The fact that we are mortal has always terrified philosophers, and in response, transhumanists dream of achieving immortality by the use of technology. The thought of death scared me too, and I want to tell you about an episode when I was about 15 or 16 years old, at the time when I declared myself an atheist. One day I found in an old family album a picture of my grandmother, of my father's side, with her parents and grandparents. This is the picture on a very thick cardboard, taken in 1901. Down here is my grandmother when she was 3 years old. Her parents must be in the top row, and her grandparents are in the middle. My grandmother died when I was very young, so I don't remember her at all in real life. When I first looked to this picture, I understood what it means to pass away into oblivion, as it was said in those days when somebody died. Nobody remembers anything about these people, except for my mother, who's now 83 and has vague memories of her mother-in-law, the little girl in this picture. According to a materialistic worldview, these people really disappeared without a trace. This made me very anxious. If nothing is known about these people today, such a passing into oblivion will surely affect me, when in 3 generations at most, nobody will remember me. In other words, at some point, about 50 to 60 years from now, I will be extinct, forgotten, as if I'd never lived. It sounds awful, doesn't it? Isn't it absurd to live this life in a never-ending struggle, to work like a slave to pay your bills, having only 4 weeks of vacation a year, to sacrifice yourself to raise your children so that one day, sooner or later, you die and are completely forgotten, as if you never existed. I don't know if such thoughts bother you, but they disturb me a lot. Being an atheist, I thought that I could defeat that through leaving something behind in science, that is leaving behind a discovery, an invention, something that would keep my name alive in people's memory. But no matter what I might accomplish and leave behind for the good of humanity, all that would remain is information, and I would still not survive as a person. Think, for instance, about Albert Einstein and of how much he contributed to science. However, what he left behind are theories and formulas, that is only information about something. We have his journals and letters, but as a self-conscious person, Einstein no longer exists. He disappeared from existence, even if pieces of his brain are kept in formalin for study. From a materialist point of view, you are just a heap of molecules that scatter in the grave. Have you ever thought about that? While I was studying chemistry at the university, many years after this episode, I had a personal experience that destroyed my faith in materialism, and I became a Christian. Since then, I have been searching for answers to the apparent contradictions I have seen between faith and science, and also for a way of understanding the relationship between Christianity and other religions. The fruit of these efforts, after 32 years of research, is what I present to you here on this YouTube channel. To respond to the challenges posed to our faith is not just a hobby, it is also the obligation of every Christian. The Apostle Peter writes, I quote, "Always be ready to make your defense to anyone who demands from you an accounting for the hope that is in you." Starting from here, the pastoral constitution of the church in the contemporary world says, I quote again, "The church has always had the duty of scrutinizing the signs of the times and of interpreting them in the light of the gospel. Thus, in language intelligible to each generation, she can respond to the perennial questions which men ask about this present life and the life to come, and about the relationship of the one to the other. We must therefore recognize and understand the world in which we live, its explanations, its longings, and its often dramatic characteristics." That's exactly what I am trying to do on this channel. In the next episodes, we will see how a materialist philosophy of mind attempts to explain human nature and the difficulties it has in explaining consciousness and free will. I hope to have captured your interest and that you'll gain a lot from watching these episodes. And last but not least, please subscribe and share this information on social media, as it may be useful to many others. God bless you.